Welcome to DTS Attorneys. Today I will be explaining what the different matrimonial property regimes are in South Africa and what it means to be married in community of property, out of community of property, as well as what the accrual system entails. Liesel, do you mind just starting off by explaining what would be the default matrimonial property system applicable if two persons were to get married without signing any agreement?
Okay, thank you, Anna. Yes. So if the people get married according to the Married Act or the Civil Union Act without actually signing any agreement, that is, for instance, when you go to your marriage officer, which would be at the magistrate court or even your pastor in church, and you do decide to get married, you would be considered married in community of property because you didn't sign what we call a contract before you got married. So that will basically mean that you share in the joint estate. Each one would share in the joint assets, but you would also share in the joint liabilities.
Okay, so the default position would be in community of property. Is there a way you can change this?
Yes, and the other option is to sign what we call an antenuptial contract. It is a contract that you sign with a notary before you get married, and that's why it's called antenuptial. And then you would, in that contract, determine how you would basically share your estate, and that would be called a married out of community of property.
Okay, thank you. And then with the community of property, you can decide to add it with the accrual, without the accrual. You might just explain what's made by the accrual system.
Yes, so the accrual system came into operation just to help the parties to share in the accrue or the gaining of the assets during the course of the marriage. So when you start off with your marriage, you can then have a value determined, and that value is again determined on dissolution of the marriage, which happens by either death or divorce. And the difference in that value would then be considered as the accrual. The parties would then be able to share in that accrual value, and they would determine the how that estate is accrued, and then they would be able to share in the gaining of that marriage.
Okay, so it's a way for just the parties to still be able to share in the growth of their estates throughout the course of their marriage, rather than being limited to everything is just the husband's property and just the wife's property, or just the one partner's property and just the other partner's property. It's a way of still equitably sharing, irrespective of what the incomes of the two partners were in the marriage.
Yes, correct. So what it may means is you will have your separate estates because you won't be liable for the debt of the other party. You would have your separate assets, although those assets will then be determined at death or divorce what the growth was, and the other party would be entitled to share in that growth.
Okay, and is there a way to opt out of having the accrual apply?
Yes, so the other option would be just to get married out of community of property. That is where you don't adopt the accrual system. And normally that would take place where people have either established their estates already, or the older people that want to get married, or they just decided to opt for that option, which would then be that they would be considered, the estates would be separate. All the assets, all the growth, all the liability takes place in the separate estates. And they could also then buy property, acquire immovable property on their own without the partners having consent to that, but the growth takes place in that individual estate, and the other party cannot share in that growth.
So, Liesel, is there a way to register a postnuptial contract? If, for instance, you got married and you realized that you wanted to be married out of community of property, but you never took the steps beforehand, or you weren't in the financial position at the time you got married to have an antenuptial contract all up?
Yes, it is possible, and it is quite a lengthy process and a court application, which is quite costly, needs to be done to change the marital regime, but it is possible. We would always recommend you to actually seek legal advice regarding this, so your attorneys will basically give you the full process of how this works.
Okay, thank you, Liesel. And then lastly, it's just very important to discuss the matrimonial property regime you want to apply with your potential partner. Finances are sometimes touchy subjects, but when you're planning on getting married, you're taking big financial stakes as well as along with life steps. So it's very important to discuss this with your potential spouse, and then you can also arrange a consultation with DTS Attorneys via email or telephone to discuss this with you.